want to make sure I get on the recording and answer to this very important question, which is if you don't want to pay for Splunk, what should you do? And so here's one of the many pages that talks about this. ELK is the free product, and Sumo Logic and Logarithm are other products that are cheaper than Splunk, commercial products. So those are things you might do. But if you want the free product, that's ELK Stack, and the easiest way to deploy that is to get the Security Onion Linux distribution, which is designed just for this. And it has an active community, so you can go open source where you don't have to pay for the software, but instead your employees have to be very skilled at Linux and stuff to run it, which is what small businesses often do, and highly Linux-oriented shops. But most shops just want things to be easy, and they want to make it easy to hire employees, so they use Microsoft products and expensive commercial products, and then you would just pay for Splunk, which is why it's worth even paying a high price for it, because then you're using the industry standard, and it's easy to maintain and update and hire employees that understand it, because it is the standard. Anyway, so now I just wanted to talk about the Splunk slides that describe what we just did here. So let me see if I can get down to, it was 10, 11, and 12. And because I think the demonstration was more valuable than the slides, really, to get an idea how this works. But after that, this is where you might find some details. So reports and dashboards, as we saw, that you have a search, you save a search, and then you just view it in a sort of visualization is the point of this. And you can share the reports and add them to dashboards, and then the dashboard is probably what somebody like a executive at your company is going to look at, a supervisor. So they say you should have a naming convention so you can find your reports, like group _ object _ description, this kind of thing, sales report, quarterly sales revenue. That's a good idea. Having a consistent name convention is very important when you end up having a lot of objects, especially when you have multiple people working at a corporation and they keep leaving and getting replaced. Then you have style guides just for your company where everything must be named just this way. And the same thing's true of coders. Coders have a bunch of standards. You must do it just this way. You must put comments in just this way, which people find burdensome, but it really is important in the long run at a company. An alternative, there are companies my students have got jobs at where they've just given up and everybody just has to map the network every time they change anything because nobody's keeping good records of anything. So that means every time you want to change anything, you have to map it all. Anyway, all right, so you run the search, you save it as a report up here, like we did, and give it a title, you can have a description, and then you can choose whether you want a time range picker on the report or not. If you want that report to always go to just one particular time, then you turn off the time range picker. Otherwise, normally I think you would save the report and have the time range picker so you can run it like every week or every month to update it without having to recreate it. But that's a choice you can make. And then there's more settings like we talked about here. And one thing we did here was change permissions, which is who's allowed to use the report and who's allowed to change the report, and what account it runs as, and so on. So that's how you make the report. So you can click the report title and reports to run it. You can use the time range picker to change the times if you like. Hello, Yuri. All right. And then you can edit reports, as we did before, because I kept making mistakes and having to edit it. So you can edit or copy them or delete them. And you can make tables or visualizations from pivoting, which we'll talk about, or reports. By the way, you can also do everything by typing in the Splunk search language transforming commands, but we're mostly using the GUI here because it's easier. So you can make bar charts and tables and so on, as we saw, and line charts, all sorts of different things. All right. You can have the top value, of course. You can sort things just like we've done before. And so here's a top value report sorted and then a bar chart. So you have bars, but the bars are, of course, shorter every line. So you can combine all these things to make charts of all different types. And this really matters in management. I remember I worked as a database analyst, and all my stuff was plain and simple. Then a guy moved in who really knew Excel, and his stuff was beautiful, and I learned from him. He impressed the management a lot more. Make these beautiful charts like that, instead of just tables of numbers that are hard for them to read. One thing I've learned, especially now I'm doing corporate consulting, is in management, anything that has like numbers, their eyes just glaze over and they don't even see it. You have to give them pie charts and bar charts and pictures. It's like what people said about Donald Trump. He would not read a page of data at all. He would only read like pictures that like had his name on it. And anything else, like a page of text or a chart, he just would blow it right off. And that's the way managers tend to be. It's not just that they're stupid, it's that they're busy and they need you to get to the point. The point for them is not details. The point is, do I have a decision to make, and how do I make this decision? And I don't care about the details. Tell me my choices. Like, you could drop this and buy a different product, or you could outsource this part of the company. That's what they're thinking about. Details are not the point. You need actionable business intelligence. This took me years to figure out. I was so deep in the details and the math, I thought everybody cared about that. I couldn't understand why they didn't. And eventually I learned what it is to be driving the company. You can't worry about every little detail. You need to make decisions at your level, and you need employees that can talk at your level. And this is the point of the CISSP certification. Yeah, you can totally create forms using Excel alone. Yeah, Excel and Access is mostly what we use, but you can use Word also. Microsoft Office is great at this, and so is Splunk. That's why at first I said this is not important. What's important is the database part that finds the data, but presenting the data and making it beautiful is also very important. So you got various choices here, different kinds of bar charts, and the one we used here where it just has a number value presented nice and big. And then you can choose formats to change the access and orientation and overlay charts and stack them and have legends. All sorts of fancy, beautiful things are possible here. You can have minimum and maximum highlighted, and you can view it as a table of statistics, or you can have a heat map where it colors them so that the bigger values are more bright and that sort of thing. You can highlight the maximum and minimum. All these things really matter for busy executives. I just want to see the thing that tells me quickly, this is a problem. This thing is not selling, so I need to advertise it more or cancel it or something. It matters, and it matters, by the way, for security too. This is one of the reasons you pay for Splunk, because you have millions of events happening all over your network, all those log files, and yet you want to zero in on which one of them means we've been hacked. And that's what this is how to pick the interesting stuff out of a storm of boring things. So dashboard, you can print things up like this, colored bar charts and such. And all right, and we've done all that in the projects. You've seen how it works.
Can you export those data to JSON file?
Export them to what?
To a JSON file.
A JSON file? I think you can, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you might have to. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know exactly, but I think you can. Yeah, your JSON file to a machine-readable file. I think I've seen that, but I don't know exactly where you go, but I think you can. Anyway, so you got names, and we talked about the permissions for reports and so on. And you can put it in a dashboard so you have several objects together. And a dashboard is a series of panels, each of which comes from a query. So you end up with a panel here where you had a title and a chart and a different chart and so on, which is what we saw. And that's really beautiful and pleasing to management. And you can go from this back into the query and modify it at any time. So this is also useful to your technical database administrators that want to use this and modify it and make it another one based on it or something. So you can go back and forth from the detailed command line that created it to the beautiful picture that you're showing management. So that's why they pay so much for Splunk. You can see it both levels, and they're connected in a way that everybody can use it. All right. So you can clone dashboards, you can export them as PDF or printed, and you can set the default dashboard so it'll always pop up here. Otherwise, it shows you the Splunk default dashboard lets you go to search and reporting, but you can add them here, have a whole series of dashboards. And there are plugins you can get from companies, like the company that made your firewall or your web server or your IDS. They will make a special plugin just for Splunk to add a custom series of options to it. All right, and so your default dashboard will have this down there all the time when you just open Splunk. All right, and so pivots and data sets we talked about. If you have your data sets, lets you display lookup tables and data models, and you can visualize with a pivot. So you have this thing I complained about, this box where all the options you need are hidden behind plus signs, but you can now choose rows and columns and filters to pick out the data you want. And we did that, so you saw how it goes. You split the rows and add them to the table, and you end up with results here, like names of games and count of successful requests and so on. Here they had another one. They sorted by type of game, strategy, arcade, accessories, which is another thing you could do from that lookup table. All right, and you can format everything and make it beautiful, of course. You can add a total at the bottom. You can split the columns and have a complicated chart with things separated into categories and subtotals this way and subtotals that way and grand totals in the corner, all the stuff that you might want. It's all available. You can have filters like we did, any filters to separate it by type. And there you go. You can visualize it all different ways, like these bar charts. I think this is close to a candlestick chart stock traders use. And there's lots and lots of settings to make it beautiful. You can have stacked columns like this, where several bits of data are separated in each column. And you can save these things as reports, and you can put a time range picker on them so you can time them, and you can, just like everywhere in Splunk, when you see a chart, you can mouse over it and then get the details of it, like we've done before. So, and there's instant pivots, which are what we used to make it a little bit faster, which you can then save as a report and put in a dashboard and so on. And the last thing was these lookups, which are a simple thing but very important. If you have some secondary kind of translation of the data that you need to add that is not just present in your log files, then you have some kind of static conversion for data, like the one we did that would convert product name into product ID into product name. You can convert zip code to state, you can convert IP address to country. There are many times when there is something like that. The machine generated data is not easy to understand, and you'd like to translate it into something that's easier to understand, like the name of the nation. So you have these lookup files like this. They're just a CSV file with at least one field, of course, has to match something in your events. So you have something that's in your events, and then you have the other things you'd like to translate it into. So as we did this, you just go into lookups and create the lookup. You add the file, so it's available to Splunk, and then you can use it with the input lookup command to add it to just one query. That's the manual lookup. You create a definition, and then you can use the lookup command in your query, which is here, it's pretty blurry, lookup, product lookup ID output, product name. So that's the point. You can add it to one query, which is fine, but what's more fun, of course, is what we did, although it took me a couple tries to get it working, where you make an automatic lookup, where from now on it will just appear in the fields list as if it had been in the original events. You will not have to worry about it anymore. Just useful new fields will appear there that are calculated from the other fields. And that's very handy. Now you just have product name in the list as if it had been in the data. So that's handy. You can create time-based lookups that will look for like the unit price depending on the time. This might be useful for things like cryptocurrency where the price keeps changing, and you would want to have like your data of how many Bitcoins you sold converted into dollars at that time. So you'd have like a table of the price every day or something, that sort of thing. All right, and that's all I wanted to say. Now let me just talk about the structure of the course. I'm not going to do any more lecture from the official Splunk material. We've covered enough. Going through 12 is good enough. We don't need to bother with 13. I'll just mention you can do scheduled reports and alerts. Splunk can, in principle, monitor live data and raise an alert, although I think it's a very inefficient product for that. An IDS would be better, and you can make reports that automatically generate at periodic time, but I don't think it's worth going through it in detail. What I want to do, we have one more class meeting, no meeting last week, but in 2 weeks we have a class, and here I just want to talk about Boss of the SOC. I've only demonstrated the first part of Boss of the SOC, and that's a lot of fun to go through in more detail. So I'll demonstrate more of that this time. And that's it. So let me stop this recording.